white genocide. So let's start there. Last night we talked about the Drexel, and I kept saying Drexler, but forgive me, I'm thinking about Clyde Drexler. But anyway, we talked extensively about the Professor George Kerosene, I can't even pronounce his last name at this point, the professor who tweeted out, "All I want for Christmas is white genocide." And we discussed it pretty much from the angle of it doesn't exist. And I realized that's only half of the story. The other half of the story is that if it does exist, it exists in a form that, well, let me explain. We discussed it yesterday. The definition of white genocide is not that is carried by white nationalists, right? Neo-Nazis. I mean, go have a conversation with them. They will tell you plain as day that what they consider to be white genocide is the mixing of the races and interracial marriage, right? And having children that are not pure white, and having this happen as a result of integration, and having this happen at an accelerated pace. This is why whenever you see advertisements from people like State Farm, who showed this black guy giving a ring to his fiance, if she said yes, fiance. The comment section was riddled with people discussing white genocide. So it's not really white genocide from the true definition of genocide. Absolutely 100% does not exist. But how they've defined genocide, which means like the slow, gradual end of the white race because of interracial mixing of the races. Does that happen? Yes. Is that genocide? No. And I'm amazed at the co-opting of language, not so much for the sake of saying that they co-opted, right? But I'm amazed at how sensitive and special snowflakes these people are with regard to, black people marrying white people or Hispanic people marrying white people, and then the overall browning. Because it's not our fault, right? It's not our fault that if you mix, you mix some black with some white, you're gonna get brown. It's not our fault that our melanin is dominant. That's your fault. No, it's not your fault either. It's just, but they're so sensitive about the idea of their race gradually disappearing and becoming brown that they termed it genocide, and it became a thing that is promulgated by neo-Nazis and white supremacists. The reality of it is over time, yes, you're going to have the overall average person is going to look brown if we're talking about the distant future, right? That's going to happen. But to use the word genocide in that context really signifies how butthurt some of these people get, right? How deeply rooted their disdain for other races really is, because they fear the thing they fear the most, or what they compare to genocide, is seeing their sister bring home, a Hispanic dude for Christmas. That's genocide to them. And in that regard, does it exist? No, it's still a ridiculous definition in usage of the word, right? There's real genocide that has taken place historically, arguably continues to take place. And to see this professor go through all the stuff the shitstorm that he's going through, because he's going through quite a shitstorm over something that is, either way you define it, it's either complete bullshit, because there's no such thing as white genocide. There's not the mass killing of, ethnic cleansing of millions upon millions of white people. It doesn't exist in that regards. But then on the flip side, even if you take their definition, neo-Nazi definition of white genocide, which is the mixing of the races, like, how do you fall on the same side as neo-Nazis in this particular argument when their argument is against integration, against racial mixing, against interracial marriages. This is the most fascinating thing to me, that they have managed to position themselves in this conversation to be the victims because they called it white genocide, and because then somebody used that word against them. It reminds me of the Christian persecution complex, right? In America, at least, there is no such thing as Christian persecution in America. Yet Christians use that label of persecution and use their backstory of being persecuted in the Bible as a means of complaining against anyone who has ideas that are not in line with their quote unquote Judeo-Christian values. In other words, they claim and they feign to be persecuted because they're no longer free to persecute. They claim to be oppressed because they're no longer allowed to be the oppressor. Same exact thing with white genocide. Same exact thing with the war on Christmas. Here we have an ever expanding Christmas holiday season that no longer goes from Black Friday to New Year's. It goes from Halloween to New Year's and a couple of days after New Year's. Yet we still feign as though there's some war on Christmas. Man, it's hot as hell. Let me take off this Dr. Who sweater. It's hot as fucking here. But that's what we're dealing with. That's what we're dealing with. And it's the same thing conceptually. And it exposes the complete ineptness and sensitivity, the weakness of people who claim white genocide. And don't feel bad. You're not by yourself, because when you talk about racial mixing, you have black people who claim that there's black genocide because they were mixing of races. You know, it's not just white nationalists. You have all probably in every single race and ethnicity, you have people who claim that their race or their ethnicity is going to be erased from the planet because of racial mixing. So it's not just white people and white nationalists who cry about this, but they seem to be the most offended. Actually, no, I can say it better than that. They seem to be, for them to be in the majority in power, they seem to be the most concerned. I guess maybe because they have the most to lose, right? They have been the dominant, the most, the majority power in the world history, modern world history. They have been there, and so in their mind, they're descending from their high place on their hill. They're descending down to being equal with everyone else. And so, of course, like we talked about yesterday, whenever you bring parity, whenever you bring equality, the person who was oppressing everyone else automatically feels like they've been oppressed because everyone else is now equal and they can't oppress. It's just fascinating to me how this particular story has played out and how people have fallen on the side of the fears of white genocide, knowing full and damn well how white nationalists and neo-Nazis define their concept of white genocide is the most racist and vitriolic bile that you can find anywhere. Yet, because they've stamped the word genocide on it, they are now in the perfect position to play the victim. That victim card is a powerful thing. And I guess, white neo-Nazis didn't want to be left out, even though they were the ones doing the victimizing.